Yo, how's it going? It's intangible. You know, this is a very busy month for me. And I'm not even just talking about boxing, I'm also talking about outside of it, so it's definitely a very hard task me being able to get out boxing content. But I'm gonna try my best to get out whatever I can. And so, last night obviously saw the end of the Olympics, which I might do a bit of a video on some of my favorite guys that I saw coming out of it. But, last night also saw the PBC card where an absolutely disgusting robbery went on. Gabriel Maestre got a gift decision over Michael Fox. And obviously, blatant corruption was exposed, and one of the judges apparently may have been a racially motivated castigation she had against Michael Fox. But even with some of the disgust that honestly I possess, towards this sport and some of the stuff that's went on recently, let's talk a bit about last night and boxing that occurred in the United Kingdom, where they were able to have a new world champion in town. Kid Galahad versus Jazza Dickens for the vacant IBF world title. Fantastic performance from Kid Galahad, and he managed to win the IBF world title with an 11th round retirement victory over Jazza Dickens, where he put up an absolutely tremendous performance. Heading into this fight, my expectation was that Kid Galahad would win. Galahad has had a bit of a tough career to this point. He's been fighting for upwards of about a decade. Through 26 fights, he was unbeaten until he fought Josh Warrington, where he fell just short. In my opinion, very well might have deserved that victory over Josh Warrington in their fight, for the IBF title. But obviously, with events earlier this year, Josh Warrington vacated his IBF title with the justification from Eddie Hearn apparently being that the sanctioning bodies, with their mandatories, were getting in the way of potentially bigger fights. But, looking at the distribution of, networks and promotional deals between the, world champions at the time, Emmanuel Navarrete was with Top Rank and ESPN. And the other champions, Leo Santa Cruz, and Gary Russell Jr. with the PBC and Fox Showtime as well. Both guys, their last fight were on Showtime, with Tug Stutnayambiar with Gary Russell Jr. and obviously Gervonta Davis with Leo Santa Cruz on Showtime pay-per-view. So it would have been extremely difficult to have been able to make that fight. So you would more than likely have to constitute his relinquishment of the IBF title as a duck of Kid Galahad, who was the mandatory for the IBF title at the time. And so Kid Galahad was obviously installed, along with Jazza Dickens, as the number 1 and number 2 guys to compete for the title. Galahad was coming off of a very impressive performance against Claudio Marrero. And Marrero has since gone on to give Showtime prospect 15-0, 16-0, something like that. 130-pound, highly ranked in the WBA, Xavier Martinez, who, if Gervonta Davis relinquishes the WBA title, has been rumored to potentially fight Chris Colbert for, I suppose, a vacant WBA super, championship belt title shot or something like that. He managed to drop him twice, Kid Galahad. And, Claudio Marrero, who, has fought guys, like I said, I think Jesus Rojas in the past. A good puncher, a dangerous guy who Galahad was able to easily dominate and beaten to submission. I must say that was a very impressive performance. And obviously he had the Warrington performance and the Tulkahon Clary performance. In the case of Jazza Dickens, though, a lot of people scoffed at this for being for a world title. Obviously, 8 years ago, he and Kid Galahad had a fight for the British, I believe either super bantamweight or featherweight title, where he was leading on the scorecards before he eventually got stopped in the late rounds. Galahad obviously overcame quite a bit of adversity, with Jazza Dickens, the southpaw, outboxing him for a good portion of the fight. And Galahad being docked a point in the 10th round of that fight, the round before he was able to secure the stoppage, for holding behind the head, and he was actually docked a point for stepping on Jazza Dickens' foot, in this fight too. But Dickens was a world title challenger before this fight, like Galahad. Fought against Guillermo Rigondeaux for his unified WBA and WBO titles. IBF titles. WBA and IBF titles. And obviously, not a lot of action went on in that fight except for one shot where Guillermo Rigondeaux landed with the straight left hand, which effectively broke Jazza Dickens' jaw. And we know Rigondeaux is a tremendous puncher. That ended the fight. Dickens obviously went on to a bit of a hard road, but got his chance at some success and had an MTK Global contract, entering the Golden Contract Tournament and picking up 2 notable wins. One over Lee Wood, who recently defeated Zhu Khan in a major upset where he dominated and stopped him in the 12th round. He picked up a win for him in the semifinal, and in the final he defeated Ryan Walsh to win himself something like a 3-fight, 2-year contract or something like that. I forget the exact details, but he managed to win that fight by a UD. Jazza Dickens, as a result of that, now would move forward into a high ranking with the IBF to eventually get a shot with Kid Galahad for a world title. And his attempt to finally become a world champion, as was made apparent in the fight, backfired. Galahad entered this fight and showed up at the weigh-in. Some people were very concerned, as he seemed to be quite dry. And so was I, the lack of facial expression from him, and how still his eyes were, in his face, and how little movement was going on. Compared to some of the bravado from Jazza Dickens at the weigh-in. It posed a little bit of concern for me, but it didn't really show up in the fight. Galahad came into the fight and showed his craft right away. Early rounds, first 2-3 rounds, Dickens was having a little bit of success. The overhand right hook, and also the left hand that he was able to dig to the body, especially, when Galahad was in the orthodox stance, were points of success that he was able to have, and Galahad opened up in the orthodox stance. Even though he was getting caught with some of those momentary shots and counters from Kid Galahad. From the opening bell, Galahad did have the better of him. I had him winning every single round in the fight, and he opened up immediately working on Jazza Dickens' body and taking a pretty aggressive approach. Now, one misconception people have about Kid Galahad is his sort of sense of fragility that some people like to bestow upon him, which I disagree with. I think he's someone who has the temperament of someone who's willing to fight negatively, and someone who's willing to utilize a touch-and-go style to win fights, and oftentimes uses clinching and those types of tactics to win, which obviously have garnered him some success. But when that has been canceled out, against good boxers in the past, he's shown the ability to, resort to a more aggressive style. And We saw in this fight, Dickens was trying to box him early. Started to utilize a bit more of an active guard in the third and fourth rounds after Galahad was trying to work his body and get more aggressive. Galahad went back to his boxing and started using his length and getting back at range and was just beating him to the punch with his jab. Even though, a lot of hand feints were being used by Dickens, Galahad just managed to stay back at range and effectively cancel that out. Just beating him up with his jab, touching his guard up, forcing him to hold his hands high and protecting his face and starting to work his body progressively more and more. And that was effectively the story of the fight. Galahad threw over 1,000 punches. And in the fight, looking at the pace Galahad set, he never had to make any significant adjustments from that point forward because of the fact that, let's be honest, he's a caliber above Jazza Dickens, who's always been around British to European level. And looking at how Galahad performed, he was busting him up. His jab started to land even more accurately as the fight went on. He cut Dickens over his left eye and heavily bruised his right eye. And as the fight progressed, it started getting worse and worse. He started bleeding really, really hard. He displayed a lot of visceral damage, and eventually in the 8th round, Jazza Dickens' corner pulled him out. And I don't blame them. They could have pulled him out a couple of rounds earlier too, but Dickens showed the warrior he is and kept going, tried his best, and was trying to get more aggressive, trying to swarm Galahad a little bit and trying to get a few power shots here and there and up his activity, but it just wasn't enough. Even the moments where he'd have momentary success, he would just get repeatedly outgunned. So, Galahad moves forward, is now a world champion, and I've been saying this for a while. He poses a serious threat to anyone at the top. Not only from the Warrington performance, but you look at a guy like Gary Russell, who, forget his inactivity, look at the guys he's fought during his title reign. None of them pose any remotely of the same stylistic, troubles that Galahad will present to him. All of the guys he's fought tend to be flat-footed, guys who like to lead and apply pressure at mid-range, and short-range too. Johnny Gonzalez, Kiko Martinez, Tux.Nyambiar, people like that, Oscar Escandon, Jojo Diaz, all of those guys like to stand in front of you in the pocket. In the case of Jojo Diaz, he's a bit more of a crafty counterpuncher, but still, most of those guys have slow feet and tend to stand stationary in the pocket, and one of Russell's biggest weaknesses is his inability to cut the ring off in his slow feet. So Galahad bringing those types of troubles is really gonna cause Gary Russell Jr. a lot of new issues if they were to fight. And same with Leo Santa Cruz, who has not fought since Rafael Rivera. At featherweight, at least, in early 2019 when he was a replacement opponent, and he ended up giving him problems. Leo also has slow feet and is coming off a loss himself to Gervonta Davis, a devastating knockout defeat, so who knows if he'll return to form. But you also look at, for example, Emmanuel Navarrete, who struggled in his fight with Ruben Villa, who has good feet and good activity. Galahad, who has a longer frame than Ruben Villa, who has an even better body attack and hits a hell of a lot harder, in my opinion. He could cause Navarrete some serious problems and potentially beat him, in my opinion. So Galahad really is the dark horse of the division, in my opinion. It is an excellent addition, should I say, to a division which has been seriously lacking in terms of depth and parity and overall competition, with the lack of high-level matchups occurring. And there's obviously still promotional barriers, but hopefully Kid Galahad, who's had talks of working with the PBC, can help rectify that. But likely you're going to see him fight someone like a Jordan Gill next, as apparently he wants to make a Sheffield homecoming. But, we'll see. Congratulations to Galahad on winning his world title. Well-deserved. He dominated and put up a wonderful performance. One of the best performances I think I've seen, throughout the year. Rene Cuarto's performance against Pedro Tataran was also very good. Lee Wood's performance against Zhu Khan was excellent. But this was one hell of a performance in and of itself, so... we'll see. Anyways, take care. Congratulations to Galahad, and I'm out.